What is your legislative scorecard at this point for the Biden-Harris administration?
Here's the thing. It's a B, and here's why.
Okay,
Uh, they've bolstered some environmental rules. Their infrastructure bill was actually a really good environmental bill, and
absolutely.
quite honestly, the climate crisis is something that's going to kill all of us. If we don't do anything about it, if we don't at least attempt to make it a change one way or another, I think that's huge, and that is sort of legacy building. I think that even in the current administration, where they're at least still having conversations about delaying student loans and canceling student debt. Yeah, they haven't done it, but they've pushed this stuff off in ways that honestly surprised even me. So these are two huge legislative accomplishments right off the bat that I really do credit the administration for, because it hasn't been easy. But here's the problem. The reason it's a B instead of a B plus or an A is the Biden administration does not have a lot of clear, symbolic, tangible things that appear to be to the benefit, direct benefit of the people who put them in office, right? Barack Obama, first thing he signs is the Lilly Ledbetter Act. If you remember
That's
that,
right.
it's like, hey, we're
Of
going to let
course.
you know what past money is, blah, blah, blah. It was a direct response to any women who were concerned about voting for him after he beat Hillary Clinton. It was a sign that I'm going to take care of the people that took care of me. And Joe Biden has some smaller level legislation like that, but he doesn't have a big signature one. He doesn't have a great big, I'm going to
Affordable Care
cancel,
Act.
yeah, I'm going to cancel some big debt for black people. I mean, yeah, CARES Act is great. He's given a lot of money. He's
The
done
HEROES
a
Act. Yeah.
good job. I don't think people recognize how hard it was to get this country back on track, even though
Oh
I
my
don't agree
gosh.
with how he handled the pandemic. But I don't have his signature black people bill. I don't have his signature people of color bill. And until they have that, the one that everybody from the barbershops to my bus driver to my housekeeper to my students can understand, you can't get an A. You
But
can't get an A.
what would that bill look like? What's the signature black people bill where you can't say black too much or else it's going to be struck down, it's going to be sued, so it's going to be challenged. So what would that signature black POC bill look like? What would it be?
A creation of, say, one of two things. One, and you can give it a fancy, sexy name if you want to, a voting rights strike force, a task force that will descend on states like Texas and Georgia and Florida and will aggressively prosecute. And I'm not saying that the DOJ hasn't gone after issues about
Yeah, they
voting
have.
rights, but they
Yeah.
haven't promoted it, and they haven't said we're specifically going after these black places to fight this. The two big things that motivated a lot of people in 2020, you remember this, Clay, we would have this conversation all the time,
Yeah.
were criminal justice issues and voting rights issues. Those were two
Yeah.
big things that really matter to a lot of people. And the Biden administration, and you can't blame it all on Joe Manchin. It really isn't all Joe Manchin's fault. But the Biden administration doesn't have much to show in those two critical issues. Black folk waiting in line 8 hours to put you in office, and you still haven't done much to make that process easier. Black
But
people
isn't
being
that
killed in the
Congress?
street.
Isn't that Congress? That's Congress. I mean, what? I
It
mean,
is
Biden can't
Congress.
do an executive order. I mean, hold on one second. Remember
Right.
when Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren said, now's a good day to forgive student loan debt. Do it with a stroke of a pen. And Biden kept on saying, it ain't going to work this way with a stroke of a pen. You
Yeah.
find he was right. He was
Yeah.
right. So aren't these things through Congress?
They are through Congress, but what you can always do symbolically, right? This is what I'm saying. These are symbolic policies. You do a big rollout. You give people uniforms. You give them red badges and black pens, okay? And you say, I am launching the voting integrity strike force at the DOJ through an executive order. This is their mandate. They've talked about that sort of stuff, but they haven't
Mm.
made it seem. And you have Stacey Abrams up there, and you have activists and organizers from Florida, and you have activists and organizers from Texas. They didn't do that.
Mm.
They didn't do a symbolic thing. And part of
That's
the White House,
strategy. That's
yeah,
good
part
strategy.
part part
Yeah.
of the White House is strategy. Part of being office is
Yeah.
strategy. Donald Trump didn't really build a wall. He just
No.
added some spackle to stuff that was already there. But he did accomplish this symbolic thing that he told his constituents he would do. And that's what Joe Biden has failed to do in a
Mm.
significant way that makes black people say, hey, we kept you, we put you in office because you were Obama's friend, and because we were terrified of this neo-Nazi terrorist maniac in the White House, right? But you haven't given us anything. And you don't have a lot of time to do it because you're running for office next year and we need to be
Wouldn't
convinced.
you agree that he has given us something, but
Oh
you're
yeah.
saying it's not messaged right? I mean, look at the judicial branch. That's the most important thing to me.
That's,
Historic amount of black judges and civil rights judges.
no one cares
Historic
about that.
amount.
That don't make
I
me vote.
know.
That don't make me vote. Come on now. That
That's
doesn't make me vote.
huge.
That's not gonna make me get up out of bed. Let me tell you something. I had this
The
conversation
GOP
with
cares about that. They care. They're outraged over that. But
they care about power. And what has happened to the GOP? They were for the last 50 years the dog chasing a car. They finally got on that bumper, and what's happened? They lost every single damn election since because they got their Dobbs decision, right?
But
So
what upsets me, Dr. Jason Johnson, is that I feel like with Democrats, with Biden, and it happened a lot with Obama. And I'm not saying you,
mhm.
but a lot of us can turn even a win into a loss. It, there could be a win in the Biden-Harris administration. Well, this didn't happen. I mean, look at what happened on Tuesday.
Mhm.
They said, yeah, but he's still bombing in the polls. Although Republicans bombed, they
Yeah.
bombed. But if Democrats would have bombed under Biden on
Oh,
Tuesday, they would have
of
blamed it all
course.
on Biden. Like we have a way of turning even significant wins. Well, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, it's symbolism, but I thought we wanted some symbolism. I mean,
But
it just
you got to give me symbolism that matters to me in my daily life that I can talk about. So, for example, I have friends who tell me all the time, they always seem to have the conversation with the same two kinds of black people, my media friends, my black media friends. And they'll say, you know what? I was in the barbershop and somebody said, at least Trump gave me a stimmy check, blah, 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 blah. I ain't never heard no black person say, I like Trump because he gave me a stimmy check. I don't believe that. I don't buy it. And every single barbershop I've ever been to in my life, even though I primarily shave my head, has at least one Cedric the Entertainer from barbershop kind of black guy that likes saying contrarian stuff. And when he spends 20 minutes talking about how great Trump was, you ask him, bro, did you vote? And they're like, nah, man, I don't vote. Because the kind of black man who is cynical enough to praise Trump is the kind of black man who's cynical enough to believe that their vote doesn't matter. Right. So I don't buy any of that stuff. I don't think it's an issue of not taking victories. I think it's an issue of the victories that you do have. Messaging is one thing, but symbolism is something else. Messaging is, hey, I'm going to keep talking about the CARES Act and I'm going to keep talking about how other parts of this bill are going to save the environment, clean water, et cetera, et cetera. That's a messaging problem. A symbolism problem is I don't have one thing that I can. I mean, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, my students aren't worried about lynching, right? You're talking about other legislation about Islamophobia and other limits. Okay, that's fine, and that does help people. But what's the thing that Black people can cling to? What's the thing that Black people can cling to in the same way that hardcore MAGA terrorist supporters could say, "Hey, we got our wall." Ketanji Brown Jackson is amazing, but she has no tacit, sort of like tactical impact on someone's daily life. And that's the failure of this administration so far. Can they clean it up? Of course they can. And he's also going to get like 41% of the white vote because he's the most popular Democratic president with white people in like 25 years. So, like I said, I suspect he's going to get reelected regardless. But I still think that you don't want to ever be lazy about it. And when you get your butt out there and tell people, hey, symbolically, this is why I should vote for you. And I say this is somebody who, as you know, I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I am just somebody who doesn't want terrorists running my country because this is the only place I know how to live on a regular basis.
okay. One more question, then we have to go. So, with that said, I understand. I got to tell you, I've been struggling with the messaging talking point. I have,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll tell you why. Because I look at Gary Chambers in Louisiana.
Right.
That brother gave his all.
Yeah.
I don't know what else the brother could have done. I have interviewed people on these airwaves. They tell me off air that I worked my ass off. I crisscrossed the state, and I could not get people to come out. There was money invested. I think about Stacey Abrams in Georgia. I don't know how much better her messaging could have been. I mean, I think about even outside of the executive branch, just Jesus ain't going to come down and make you feel good. There appears to be, I don't know what the formula is. And when I
Mm-hmm.
just think of local, I think about Mississippi. I think about Chris Jones in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Jones in Arkansas, leagues ahead of frickin' Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be another conversation that we have to have as well. I don't know if it's a cultural conversation. I don't know if I don't know what it is, but when I see good candidates, locally, born and raised in these areas, and they can't even get 30% voter turnout.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say this all the time. In 1868, 1868, we had 80% black voter turnout. What is it going to take for folks to see the urgency? This shit is scary as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And we got 30%, 28%, 25%. I mean, I don't know. I feel like even if the messaging was perfect, I don't know. I guess if you're not being taught civics and it's propaganda education,
Yeah.
but I struggle, brother. Fine, close it
Yeah.
out.
Look, you're not being taught civics. You are unaware of what your actual history is, and you don't often believe that the people who you vote for can make a substantive difference in your life. That's what it is. When you were talking about 200 years ago with black people voting, obviously it was significantly more dangerous. People being murdered for voting. I mean, murdered
Exactly.
for going to vote, right?
Literally at
It
the
was
voting booth.
yeah, murdered at the voting booth, murdered after you were elected to office. Um, we ain't the same people. And I'm not saying that in a better or worse. We're just not the same people. It was seen as a life or death situation at that point. And it was like, hey, this is the only thing we can do. And I would argue, and I again, this is not meant to insult people today or mythologize people in the past. But if you spent 3/4 of your life enslaved, death don't hit the same. I mean, it doesn't. Your fear of death, I mean, death is a release if you have lived a life of suffering and oppression. Where do you think suicide bombers come from? Life is so difficult. Life is so miserable. Life is so full of constant pain and only occasional pinpricks of light that the idea that I could die doing something that might make me happy is better than a life of living on my knees under the whip. That is an incentive system that none of us can imagine because we don't live that way, but that is a fundamentally different system than what we have now. I'm not excusing people today. I'm not, mythologizing people in the past, but that's why it gets people, that's why it's hard to get people to vote. And I will say this because I think it's key. I had a conversation with my students again at Morgan State University last week, and we were talking about the elections. I have large numbers of students who generally don't care about voting, right? And then I will bring in a member of the League of Women Voters, get everybody registered, and 18 out of 20 students will vote because somebody spent the time to talk to them about it. I mean, like over and
Wow.
over, I've had this happen over and over. My students like, I don't care. Voting doesn't matter. I bring someone in, they talk to them about it. They're like, oh, it's that simple, and they vote. I did a conversation last week about Daniel Cameron. I didn't talk about Andy Beshear. I did not talk about the white Democratic governor of Kentucky. I just showed them pictures of Daniel Cameron, and I talked about what he did with Breonna Taylor. And at the end of class, the same kids, the same majority who are like, I don't know if voting matters. I said, if you had the opportunity to go to Kentucky right now and make sure this black man never got in office, would you do it? Everybody raise their hands. Because sometimes getting people to vote is about stopping someone you hate more than getting what you want. And every political scientist that trained me throughout my career told me that that's not how politics works, but it is now.